Right, let's join our news correspondent Richard Chambers live in Washington, D.C. for the very latest. So, Richard, polls opened a short time ago. When are we going to know who's won and who's going to the White House?
It's hard to believe in some ways, Colette, that this is the end of what has been one of the longest, most fraught, most violent and most unpredictable campaigns in U.S. political history. And the unpredictability actually extends to when we might find out who is the actual winner of this. The consensus has been that this might take some time, that this counting process and the deliberations may take several days, deeper into the week, before we know who wins. Although there is a train of thought that if there is a clear margin in the earlier declaring or counting swing states of Georgia, North Carolina in the South, if it looks like Kamala Harris has an edge over Donald Trump there, well then you could take the indication that she is set for a very good night indeed. But it will take a long time before you're counting all of the votes, particularly the mail-in ballots and the early votes. More than 80 million Americans have already cast their ballots. It is likely to be well into tomorrow at the earliest before we have a definitive result, and that leads to potential tensions. Already you're seeing the Trump campaign coming out, accusing the Democrats of fraud, pointing the finger at election officials in the key state of Pennsylvania already. And it was there last night that J.D. Vance, the vice presidential nominee for the Republicans, branded Kamala Harris as trash. Now, there has been an indication in the polls that late breakers, people who've made up their minds late, are opting for the Democratic candidate, particularly women. And that is not something, though, that worried supporters of J.D. Vance last night.
You could say, oh, women are getting out there early. Oh, okay. Go ahead, Karen, get out there and vote early. It's everyone else who's going to show up now that we're not worried about.
It's been very bitter, very bitter. I'm excited about it. You know, I had, mixed feelings also, but I want somebody that's strong and that it's a leader.
No matter who wins or what happens, call someone that you know that's from the other side and say, hey, look, let's get it together. Because in America, it's not really supposed to matter who's at the top. It's supposed to be we the people.
Feeling really excited, and I definitely think that the numbers are there for him, but I'm really terrified of the cheating that they're doing in the swing states.
Richard, just for a little bit of an explainer, the way the election works there, it's very different to how we run elections here.
Yeah, it certainly is. The person who wins the most states across the United States is not necessarily declared the winner. That is not the aim of the election because they have the electoral college system. So popular vote doesn't necessarily matter. The two candidates compete for individual states, all 50 states plus the District of Columbia, where Washington is, where I'm standing right now. So because so much of America is already set in its ways in terms of has made up its mind, liberal California will go for Kamala Harris, Alabama will go for Donald Trump, for example, you're essentially fighting for just 7 states, 7 battleground or swing states. You'll have heard that terminology over the last while. So this is why so much of the focuses on such a small part of America. A lot of America feels like its vote doesn't really matter because they're not in swing states. So that is what they're competing for. The electoral votes, which are effectively proportionally assigned to each state, counting their number of representatives in the House of Representatives plus their 2 senators. So Pennsylvania, we've spent a lot of time talking about over the last while. It is the biggest of the swing states with 19 points. Both candidates are trying to get to 270 electoral votes, totting up each of the states and the votes that they have in each of them to get to 270, a bare majority out of 538. Some consternation in recent years as to whether or not the electoral college system works. It is unrepresentative. Bigger states have less of a say than smaller states, but that was what the intention was, to give smaller states more of a say in American affairs. But not a perfect system, and it is one that leads to high drama, though, and that's likely to play out over the next 24 to even 48 hours.
And you bring us all that drama. Our news correspondent, Richard Chambers, live in Washington, D.C. Thank you for bringing us all of that.